and welcome to the Practical Animal Channel with me, John Beaumont. Today we talk to Ben Long, a professional falconer. He manufactures falconry furniture and he has a falconry school. Ben, how did you get into falconry?
It's a long time ago to remember, but I was quite interested in field sports and shooting and such like, and it's sort of something I read about, and it sort of went from there, really. Very difficult to get into in those days, of course. It was 50 years ago, and very few falconers around in the country, you know.
What can you tell us about this beautiful bird on your fist?
This is a Joe Peregrine that we're training for somebody. It's not mine. She's about 22 weeks now. What she's good at is biting my hand at the moment, which is not so good. She's a bit excited and wants to fly and so on. So she's about 20 weeks. And she's, as you see, a sort of dark version of a Joe Peregrine. They come in all sorts of colours, from black to white and everything in between. But she's coming on pretty nice. She's been flying free for probably about 6 weeks or so.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Probably a bit of a cheeky question, you don't have to answer, but what would she be worth?
Well, this year, not as much as they used to be, because we haven't had the interest from the Middle East this year so much as previous years. Last year, she would have probably been 5,000. This year, probably considerably less. So the Joe and the Peregrine being the sort of arguably the best falcons there are, and then you mix the two together, they get to be quite expensive, and they're not so easy to breed in the respect that when you've got most of them, if you breed a hybrid, you put two hybrids together, you get more hybrids, but these don't breed naturally, so they have to be done by artificial insemination every time. So that's why they're more expensive than others anyway. So yeah, they're a lot less this year, but who knows what it'll be like next year? No idea, really.
What has caused the dip in price or value, do you think, this year?
It's only the fact that we haven't had people coming to this country to buy falcons for the Middle East. They have this thing called falcon racing over there, and they come to us for tens and tens and hundreds of falcons every year to go out to the Middle East for this. But because of the virus, we haven't had the people coming here to pick the birds up, so this is the problem, really. And so these are then, it's a supply and demand. So there's now not the demand. So the prices have come down dramatically this year, but who knows what it'll be like next year? No idea.
How did you start making falconry furniture commercially then?
Commercially, well, when I first started, like everybody else, we had to make our own because there wasn't anybody to buy it from, really. And everybody sort of read the books, and it told you about making gloves and all this stuff. And I was lucky to be in an area where glove making was common. It was a common thing. They had lots of outworkers that stitched gloves for people, for companies. And so I got into making a few things, and when probably early 70s, I was starting to make things, and I met a few other falconers, and they said, "Where did you get your glove from?" So I made the glove. "Well, can you make me one?" And it went on from there. And then about 1981, I started full-time making equipment because I found myself sort of between jobs, if you like. So I haven't had a proper job since 1981, so that's not too bad, really.
Was it an interesting time taking the plunge into your own business?
Yeah, it was actually quite scary, and it got scarier as well at times. But sort of managed to keep going all the time, some way or another.
Did you have to have a business plan in those days?
Business plan, yeah, that's a good question, really. Business plan, yeah. I mean, that's all rubbish anyway, isn't it? But that's something you give to the bank to make them believe things, and there's rubbish. There's no sense in it at all. No business plan. Just make stuff and sell it. That was the plan, really. and that's what I did. So, but it did get to be massively successful quite quickly, because I probably was the only person to make stuff that didn't look homemade back in those days. So, and the amount I sold went probably over about 5 years, increased from 3,000 or 4,000 in the first year to 20 times that much over about 5 years. So I was mad. It was mad. I couldn't make enough stuff. Couldn't go out. Couldn't fly any birds properly, or you tried. I did manage a bit, but all that was sort of, it became the hobby again. Really, the flying the hawks. Yeah. So all good fun.
How did the school come about then?
Well, that was about 15 years ago, really, when what happened is that I did less equipment because we started to get equipment imported from Pakistan, and they'd been making equipment for the Middle East market for years and years, and nobody actually imported it. Of course, it's for pennies. You get a hood. I mean, I was selling a hood for £50 35 years ago. And they came in about 15 years ago with a hood for £3. So, it wasn't any good, but it was a hood, to all intents and purposes. And people bought it and still buy it because it's cheap. So what happened is I began to do less equipment, and then people came to me and said, can you do a course? Can you teach me this or that? So that's how it came about as well. It sort of almost evolved into it, really. And now we have quite a lot of people from all over the world really coming on courses and experience days, and we do the displays and all that stuff all over the country. Yeah, it's all pretty busy. Not this year. Obviously, we haven't had any displays this year, but we managed one, I think, 3 weeks ago. That was it. That was the only one.
In the bird of prey industry today, there seems to be openings there seem to be different sectors. So teaching courses, making falconry furniture, breeding, giving displays. Have you got any tips for somebody wanting to go into falconry profession?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really many things that actually you can make a living at. There's a lot of people that purport to make a living, but they're actually got real jobs, so they go and do a few displays, or they go and visit schools, or whatever it might be. To actually make a living is quite difficult. And really the only people that make a living as such are the people doing things like, bird control on landfill and all those things, and they're but so they go off and do bird scaring stuff, and because it's a proper commercial venture, there's sort of money in it, really. So lots of people do that, and I think that's probably the only way to get into it nowadays. I mean, you can do other things, but they require, to do displays and so on, it requires a lot more skill, really. So go out and fly a Harris hawk and sort of purport to be scaring birds off, it's not a difficult thing to do. Whereas, you go to a display and fly, we've done, on some occasions, we've done 8 displays in a day with 3 or 4 birds on each display. And they all come in afterwards, so there's a lot of skill involved in that, a lot of experience, reading individual birds and keeping them in flying condition and so on. Is just to do the one day is hard enough, and then you do that 3 times on the trot, 3 days on the trot, so there's a lot of skill involved in that sort of thing. But say, just to go and go around some buildings and fly Harris hawks, not so much that difficult thing to do, really.
That's great. Is there anything else you would like to add, Ben?
I don't know, really. The only thing I'd like to add probably is anybody thinking of taking up falconry would be to do a course with somebody who's with experience, because again, some people are doing courses with not that much experience themselves, really. Do a course, but most of all, read loads of books, because books they are the real knowledge, and that's how I learned. I had nobody to ask 50 years ago. I just had to read as many books as I could find, and also have to say that reading some of the old books rather than the newer ones, the ones which are came along sort of in the last 30 years, tend to be entirely sort of down the channel of flying Harris hawks, and everything else is sort of secondary. But if you can find ones which are prior to about 1980, they will give a much more of a flavour of what the sport's about. Because, when I started 50 years ago, we didn't really have we certainly didn't have radio tracking. We didn't really have any captive bred birds. Everything was wild take, and it actually gives a lot more of a flavour of the real sport, So anybody who wants to do that, that's what I would do. Read as many books as possible.
That's great. Well, Ben, thank you very much indeed for being on the Practical Animal Channel.
No problem. Thank you very much for calling me.